I have great pleasure today to be interviewing David Engwicht from Creative Communities International. David has 30 years experience in placemaking and is the inventor of the walking school bus and the 7-day makeover. He is an author, inventor, artist, designer, thinker, communicator and motivator. He is a TEDx presenter, a keynote speaker, and runs amazing one-day masterclasses. I think it's fair to say he is a change coach. So welcome, David, to Perth, and thanks very much for speaking with us today.
Not a problem.
So maybe let's start off with just talking a little bit about what is placemaking.
All right, so I describe placemaking as being like homemaking. Okay. So a homemaker takes a house and turns it into a home. A placemaker takes a public space and turns it into a place.
Okay.
And in fact, placemaking is homemaking in the public realm. So there was a time when people's sense of home extended out their front door, out into the street, down to the corner store, down to the centre of town. But that sense of home has been gradually shrinking over time for a whole range of reasons. So what placemaking literally is doing is giving people back that sense of home and ownership and belonging in the spaces where they live.
Okay, so that's really interesting from an aged care perspective, because all of our subscribers are basically people involved in the aged care industry.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we try to do is create domestic home-like environments within these very big buildings, because generally you have a building that might house 120 people.
Yep.
So it's like, how do we do that in such a big build and be able to create that scale and that feel of a domestic kind of home?
I think there are multiple levels to that. So the first thing I'd preface this by saying is that those elderly people have come from a home environment, and if we go back historically and you talk to them about the way that their neighbourhoods worked prior to the changes that we've seen, they will tell you stories about sitting on the front steps, shelling the peas, supervising kids playing in the street out the front. Yes. So they were integral cogs in that sense of home and place that used to operate in our neighbourhoods. Like if you go to European towns, they'll be sitting out on the benches on the main street, on the piazzas, where people can access their collective wisdom, so they have an ongoing role within society and in humanising those public spaces. Now, unfortunately, that's been eroded over time, and it becomes tragic when they reach a certain age where they have to be put in an aged care facility, where often those places feel more like a hospital than they do the home street that they came from. Yes. So I think you're right that the multiple challenges are, first of all, the actual space that they live in. Does that feel like a hospital room, or does that have some sense of home? But then what is their connection to the outside world? How is their collective wisdom accessed by the community? What kind of role do they have in their old age? So then that comes to the spaces outside of the actual living room that they're in. How do they interact with other people within that space? How do they interact with the visitors that come into the space? How do they interact with the kindergarten that's just down the street, or the other residents in that particular community? So, it's a dual challenge.
And I guess one of the issues too is that in aged care now, as opposed to what it was like even 15, 20 years ago, where you had a lot of residents who were classified as low care, so they were still a lot more able-bodied, whereas nowadays a lot of the residents that are in aged care, it's either they have dementia and they are able-bodied, or they have a much higher level of frailty. So how do you then ensure that, especially people that, because with dementia residents, they tend to lock them away because they're frightened about them getting out and hurting themselves. And with people with frailty and with the nursing issues that they have at the moment with staff, they don't have the time to be able to make sure that residents who are in big princess chairs, for example, are taken and put into environments. So I guess the design of it needs to be very carefully thought of.
I think there are multiple challenges for that. So we're making over an aged care facility in Brisbane, and we're taking what we call a whole of systems approach. Because you can design the best gardens in the world, but if there are policies and procedures within the organisation, for example, locking doors and then forgetting to unlock them in the morning. Just really, really, really simple things will stop those residents from going outdoors. So you have to take a whole of system approach, which is from the board level down. It's about, just a simple example. So aged care facilities have to have a care plan for each resident. Now, I'll bet my bottom dollar that 95% of the care plans in Australia do not include how do we give this person outdoor time. Right? Now, in drawing up the care plan, the staff should be talking to the relatives going, what did this person love doing before they come in here in the outdoors? What are the ways that we can continue to give them that kind of experience? So it's not just a catch-all, it's about what is the specific things, So if they love fixing lawnmowers, bring in some old lawnmowers and allow them to tinker with the lawnmowers. So it's really connecting them to what they love doing previously. I think the other challenge in all of this is the people who are coming to visit these people, often they just go and visit them in their room, and so they're continuing the incarceration of those people by staying with them in the room. So what's in place to encourage those visitors to take that person outdoors? And again, that should be part of that care plan of how to give them outdoor time. So in the facility that we're making, we're starting a campaign called Has the resident you're visiting had 15 minutes outdoors today? And then we're going to produce a little brochure that has a mud map. We're creating 5 destinations like Bali, the Mediterranean, the ponds, the town square, etc. We will theme each of those. We will have wayfinding signage so that the visitor can find their way to it. So it's a whole, and then train the staff to again reinforce that with the visitors. So I think that you just got to think creatively about how you these. We see elderly people who haven't been outside for 6 months, 12 months. And I mean that. Anybody on the board or the staff that was locked up for a week during COVID know what it's like to be locked up for a week.
Absolutely, I think one of the issues too is that there are staffing issues in aged care for sure. They don't have enough staff, and they really don't have the staff. They're finding it hard enough as it is to take care of a lot of the standard type of needs that a resident requires. So being able to do things like that, what you're saying, I guess, is to put it back on the visitors. So putting it back on them enables the family member or whoever to come in and take mum or dad on a journey, and then that means that the staff it's not such an impost on the staff, so it's putting it more back onto families and visitors, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think there's multiple levels to that again. So one of the things that the staff, for a start, the staff are getting no training on the importance of outdoor time. So, they don't understand that vitamin D from sunlight is essential for preventing falls, for example. So the behavioural problems will go down if the resident is spending some time. A lot of the behavioural problems are driven by the fact that they've been locked up for so long.
Especially in dementia, yes, absolutely.
So, first of all, there's kind of like a small investment in taking getting the resident outdoors results in less other tasks that person has to do. So it might be a slight increase overall, but it's not that great. The issue, as I said, the staff are not receiving any training in the importance of that or how it helps diminish their workload. And then, as we've said, at the other end of it, we're not capturing the energy of the visitors. The visitors aren't really probably thinking about it either. Mum hasn't been outside for 3 months. What kind of impact is that having?
Yeah.
And why the education of the visitors is so important in my books is this: that if your mum has been locked up for 3 months and you say, do you want to go outside? She's probably going to say no. Because that's what she's got used to, right? And it's a big challenge. But if I come in and say to Mum, now, Mum, today, would you like to go to Bali or do you want to go and visit the Mediterranean? Right? You see the difference it makes?
Yes, that's the language.
So that's why, and on our little mud map that we give them those hints. We say, don't ask your loved one, do they want to go outside? Put a choice to them. They'll always respond to a choice better than if it's just, do you want to go outside, which is a yes or no answer. If I say, do you want to go to the Bali or the Mediterranean, there is no yes or no. It's either, well, I'm supposed to choose one of those two, Emma.
Do I get a cocktail with the Bali trip?
So there are creative ways, I think, of engaging getting the visitors and volunteers as well, because a lot of these places have a lot of volunteers that come in. If they think their job is just to go and sit with somebody in their room, again, that's limiting the potential we have for using that resource to get people outdoors.
It's very difficult sometimes too, going to see somebody in an aged care facility. You run out of conversation because tends to be a bit of a one-sided conversation because you're telling them about what you've been doing, whereas really they haven't been doing anything. So there's not much for them to say except perhaps a nice meal that they had last night. So it does give the visitor an opportunity as well to have better engagement with their family member, because if you have created these kind of Balis or Mediterraneans, obviously when they go on the journey there's things for them to talk about along the journey. Is that right?
Absolutely. And I think the other big thing, you're absolutely right, that if I go and visit Mum in her room, 4.5 minutes I've run out of things to tell her, and I say, what have you done, Mum? I sat and watched hymns of praise for 3 hours this morning, and that's about it, and particularly if you bring the grandkids with you, then they're bored out of their brains in that 3.5 minutes. Whereas I think that if they're taking grandma on the adventure somewhere, And, you know, they can go, okay, well, you know, we've been to the ponds, how about we go to the Mediterranean now? Whatever.
Yes.
Then those people are going to stay a lot longer, which is going to take the pressure off of the staff again. So.
Yeah. So it's a journey for everyone, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So children, I think that's one of the big things, is trying to, because the elderly most of them love to engage with kids.
Yeah.
And even if it's not their grandchildren, they love to be around listening to children. I mean, we all love it, really. The giggling of children is quite a gorgeous thing to hear.
Yeah.
So it is encouraging people to bring their grandchildren into spaces like that, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because they sometimes can be quite a frightening or daunting place for children to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.